and welcome to the FI Newscast, where we bring you relevant news in the food and beverage industry. Today is Friday, April 21st, 2023. We have a great show for you today. Special thanks to our sponsor of today's episode, HSBC Bank. And our special guest today is John Church, Managing Director and Head of Food and Beverage for HSBC. It's going to be a great chat. But first, we're going to cover some of the top stories from this week that we think are worth a second look. In franchise news, two fast food giants are taking steps to make themselves stand out above the crowd. Subway announced that they are entering in new multi-unit agreements with 5 owners across the United States. These agreements will pave a path for the transformation of more than 200 existing Subway locations in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and the Mid-Atlantic. Subway has already opened close to 900 new restaurants worldwide in the past year and a half. McDonald's also made their own headlines recently, stating their intentions to further innovate their menu items. Their goals include, quote, softer, more pillowy buns, perfectly melted cheese, and juicier caramelized flavor from adding white onions to the burger patties where they are on the grill. But will it translate to juicier sales? We'll see how they've been faring in their first quarter of fiscal year 2023 as their earnings results come out next week. In the farm sector, less appetizing news for the dairy industry, unfortunately. The International Dairy Deli Bakery Association, along with IRI, report that dairy prices hit record highs in the second half of 2022. The sector has seen unit prices rise by as much as 41% in year-over-year comparisons. Dairy continues to make up a large part of sales in the refrigerated department and has seen sales go down in January in all its subcategories. Heading across to the Atlantic and beyond, some serious weather reports of which to take note. Europe seems to be struggling with extremely dry weather. Bloomberg reports that 60% of the Spanish countryside is plagued with drought, while farmers in Italy and Portugal are dealing with the same conditions. Heat and dryness cause Italy's largest river, the Po River, to have the lowest levels ever seen in 70 years. That's creating a halt in crop planting, which farmers say will affect the amount of crops for the season. In addition, weather problems are also hitting Southeast Asia, helping to create the biggest global rice shortage in 20 years. The demand for rice went up in the past few years as the war in Ukraine complicated supplies of major grains. This brings to mind when the World Trade Organization gave a dim outlook for the world's GDP this year, citing extreme weather conditions and geopolitical tensions as major impacts. In retail news, one chain continues to dominate over the others. Market Force Information reports that after surveying nearly 7,000 consumers, Walmart was the #1 store choice for groceries. Their numbers were almost double that of Aldi and Kroger. Reasons for choosing their primary grocer included convenient location, value for money, and good sales and promotions. The study also noted that 63% of respondents highlighted out-of-stock items as a continuing problem they still face. That's down from a high of 82% in 2020, but the current number still shows the lingering effects of COVID. And finally, some news about a fruit that's become like gold in the figurative sense. A farm in Japan is growing the most expensive strawberry in the world. It's called the Bijin Hime. That means beautiful princess in Japanese, and it can cost from about $36 to as much as $60 a pound. Celebrity chef Paul Hollywood tried the luxurious fruit recently and said it was like, quote, an apple meets a strawberry meets a grape meets a dozen red roses that you smell. This isn't just a fruit, it's a roller coaster ride of taste. And those are your top stories. We're going to turn now to our special guest. He is the Managing Director and Head of Food and Beverage for HSBC Bank. He has 35 years of corporate and investment banking experience with a focus on identifying and developing strategic banking relationships with global food distribution, beverage, and agriculture companies. He has firsthand experience in the ag sector. He grew up on a farm in central Illinois and remains active in the enterprise. He is here today to give us his take on the current events surrounding the food and beverage industry. Please welcome John Church. John, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Susan. Good to see you.
All right. I got to ask you, first off, after hearing that story about the strawberry, you are an expert farmer yourself, growing up on a farm. Is it possible to create a strawberry that tastes like an orange meets a strawberry meets an apple meets a grape meets a dozen red roses? What are your thoughts on that?
That's well outside of my expertise. I think I'm a corn and soybean farm kid, and so specialty crops were not our forte. But I'll tell you what, if one can raise that level and that quality of product at that price, it's something for us to further consider.
Absolutely. Very well said. Thank you, John, for that. All right, we'll get right into it. Don't want to waste another second. First off, I want to hear from you, John, as the head of food and beverage for HSBC, what is on the front of your mind lately, given all that's been going on in the economy? How is it affecting the food and beverage industry from where you stand? What have you been seeing so far?
Boy, there's so many topics to focus on these days. I mean, not least of which is inflation, of course, climate, the impact it's having on the production, not only in the U.S. but as you mentioned earlier on the globe, the cost of capital and how it's impacting the food industry, the beverage industry, the consumers, and also we're anticipating a bit of an increase in pricing as well on capital. I think economists believe that there are 1 to 2 more hikes in the making, and so that's a bit of a concern. Food security clearly remains topical, particularly in light of the continuation of the Russian and Ukraine conflict and climate issues again worldwide. And last but not least, I think the recession continues to loom. The possibility of it, is it likely to happen? Is it not likely to happen? So there's a lot of debate around it, and clearly the food sector, beverage sector tends to manage through recessionary periods reasonably well because people have to eat. That said, consumers tend to trade down during these times and turn to more private label products or other lesser expensive products. But I have to say that the quality of private label is very, very good. So there's no real loss in quality and taste. They gain on the price side.
Right. You did mention inflation. I want to go more into that with you. I want to hear your expertise on that. From where you stand, how is inflation specifically impacting companies and consumers?
Well, inflation certainly created some challenges for food and beverage companies. The increase in the cost of raw material, labor, energy, and again, capital has led companies to review, identify, employ greater efficiencies, and in some cases, use alternative suppliers. Some have turned to additional automation, and while others have traded down certain inputs, ingredients, when and where possible without compromising quality and taste. In Europe, food inflation is expected to continue through the summer months, and after which time it's expected to level off, but remain elevated through the end of the year. But in 24, we're expecting a little relaxation in inflation there. So hopefully that will happen. In the US, food inflation seems to have tempered a bit. However, we should continue to proceed cautiously as prices of produce and nuts and perhaps even wine could rise due to issues associated with weather on the West Coast that was experienced earlier this year. So, and then I guess I'd like to comment maybe a little bit on the protein front. Beef prices are likely to remain high as there's less cattle on feed. This could lead consumers to buy less or trade down in cuts in quality. And we're about to start the grilling season in earnest with Memorial Day weekend in about a month's time away. So we should learn a lot more about buying behavior at that time. And then on the beverage front, I happen to be speaking with a beverage distribution executive about consumer behavior. And he said that when fuel prices rise, consumers, at least they've found, consumers tend to spend less on beverages at C-stores and at gas stations. I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is indeed interesting. Thanks for that little bit of insight there. I want to shift towards your wheelhouse. You are the head of food and ag sector at an international bank. Let's talk about international deals, M&A, that sort of thing. You must have seen in your role a lot of deals, going on that leads to cross-border activity, international expansion. How has that activity been in the past 12 months? Has it changed at all? If so, how? And what's your outlook for this year on that?
Well, the economic conditions certainly affected the deal flow in 2022, though despite economic headwinds, there were a number of significant M&A transactions last year that provided companies a presence in the fast-growing snacking and confectionery, ingredients, and beverage categories, as well as protein. Most notably were the Mondelez purchase of Cliff Bar for $2.9 billion, Hormel's purchase of Planters for $3.35 billion, and Cargill and Continental Grain's purchase of Sanderson Farms for $4.5 billion. So those are pretty sizable transactions. And while these were U.S.-based transactions, each have cross-border elements embedded into the business. And as for this year, there are some noteworthy transactions in the queue, including the Ferrero Wells Enterprises transaction, the Novozymes Christian Hansen transaction, and the DSM Firmenich transaction, both being very, very big deals. Now, those are big deals. They may take a little while to come to close, but there will be other deals, I believe, throughout the year. Cost of capital will be impacting perhaps some of the decisions, but I think once the cost of capital begins to reduce a little bit, I think we'll see an elevated pace of M&A activity.
John, in your view, what are some areas, some countries or regions, if you have any insights internationally speaking, where are some places where there is likely to be an outsized growth for the food and beverage sector?
Two, maybe three come to mind. India certainly being one, China being one, and then of course, I think there's a lot to take place in the U.S. Certainly India and China's economies are opening up and improving. They have large populations that are prepared to spend money on food, beverage, and dining out. From a technology perspective, I think India is very, very well placed to develop further ag tech technologies that can enhance ag production, household income, and ultimately nutritional requirements in country. They also have a lot of potential to export. So as they ramp up their production, they can export more, of course. China is well positioned to do the same. With its economy now open and ramping up, it'll be interesting to see how much or how many tons of corn, soybeans, and protein it imports in 2023. And then, we have some clients that have taken advantages of the opportunity to expand, to broaden their presence in those particular countries. They continue to look at them very, very closely, and they continue to contemplate further investments in those countries. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, there continues to be opportunities to lead on the food and beverage innovation front, as well as in the areas of ag tech and food tech.
Well, we are going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we will have more from John Church of HSBC Bank. Stay with us.
The world is changing. Opportunity doesn't look like it used to. It takes vision to see the world for what it's worth. Eating your vegetables, the delivery person, and even ocean debris doesn't look like it used to. At HSBC, we look ahead to help you realize that opportunity can be found everywhere. See how at opportunity.hsbc.
All right, we are back with John Church, one and only head of Food and Beverage Managing Director at HSBC Bank. All right, let's get back into it, John. Now, you grew up on a farm, and now you are the head of the food and beverage and ag sector in one of the largest commercial banking companies in the world. I gotta ask you, what is your outlook on the current state of farming in the U.S.? What are the challenges? Are we on an upwards track? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, from a personal perspective, the farming sector appears to be sound and on solid footing. That said, farming is a challenging business. Farmers are price takers, not price setters. They operate at the expense of climatic conditions, rising input costs, and geopolitical issues. Through advancements and investments in automation and precision farming technology, farmers operate more efficiently today than ever before. However, the expense at doing so is rising, which in turn requires a lot of intellectual and financial analysis and fortitude. Farming is a passion of mine and certainly of our families. Our family farm has been in place for well over 100 years, and so I think we're on the fourth or fifth generation in the business, and so it's exciting, it's challenging. It's a bit of a gamble from time to time, as many know, and when you're at the blessing of weather conditions and uh, the performance of technology and of seeds and chemistries, which you rely heavily on and pay a fortune for, you certainly hope that you're able to produce a crop that covers your input costs.
A lot of insights there. Thank you for that. You mentioned a little bit about technology within farming. I want to go more into that because as the times have progressed technologically, you have seen that absolutely impacting farming. I'm sure you would agree with me. We have the regenerative farming trend, recent news, Kind Snacks, proclaiming that by 2025 they want 100% of their almonds sourced from bee-friendly farms. You've also got a lot going on with robotics and AI in farming. Announcements in recent weeks of laser weeding robot companies, insecticide spraying drones, self-driving tractors, of course, from John Deere. That's gotten a lot of press in the past few years. John, what are your thoughts on all of these new trends? Will they help the farming industry? Will they hurt? I mean, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, there's certainly going to be a lot of benefits to them, but again, it's a costly proposition. We've used drones in our enterprise. They've become very, very handy, especially on the surveillance of how the crop is actually growing, where there are deficiencies, where there is infestation of insects. You can fly the drones over vast bodies of land to determine where we need to apply additional insecticide if necessary. And of course, at that stage, typically they're done on an aerial basis. So you survey, you record, and then you send it to a distributor, and they'll bring the airplane in and they'll take care of the insect issue based on the information that you've provided. So it's pretty cool stuff. Precision farming has been around for quite some time. Farmers have taken full advantage of it. Again, another costly proposition, but one that pays off because it reads the land in such a way based on not only the production, but on where the deficiencies are within the farm. So you can apply greater fertilization and to areas of the farm that you would otherwise not be able to without that technology. That saves money over the long haul. So it's very precise, and also on the planting, so many plants per inch, so many seeds per inch, I should say. So it's really, really helped agriculture in general, and there's more to come. I think ag tech is a really interesting area. There's so much development going on at the moment, but to that end, there's also a lot of development on the food tech side, and there are a couple of companies that have come out with products recently that extend the shelf life, and they preserve the quality of produce, and that's pretty important because, as there are so many people around the world that have deficiencies in their caloric intake and their their daily diets, and so it's very, very important that these companies continue to focus on what they can do to not only preserve but extend the life of produce to reach the growing population worldwide.
I want to shift gears here towards something that has been going on in the farming sector, environmental sustainability. You see
Mhm.
that at large in the food industry. And I did mention, for example, regenerative ag with the initiative that Kind Snacks is doing, as well as many other companies. You've heard, a lot of press announcements regarding that type of thing. But sustainability, ESG, environmental focus. In your view, what have you been seeing? What's driving that push, towards these ESG efforts within the food sector?
I think the consumer is. The consumer is deeply concerned about the impact the carbon footprint is creating, greenhouse gases, certain uses of inputs in farming. They want to know where product is produced, how it's processed, packaged, and delivered to retailers. Consumers are seeking traceability, and CPGs are listening to the consumers, sharing consumer sentiment. Of course, with that change comes a price, and consumers appear to be willing to pay the premium associated with the cost to produce a more sustainable product in a more sustainable manner.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Want to wrap it up here with a final question. What would be your takeaway message to food and beverage executives who are looking to grow, looking to adapt, looking to succeed in 2023?
I suppose, I express to food and beverage executives looking to grow, adapt, and create diversity to consider early stage investment opportunities in existing or adjacency categories that complement changing consumer demands. Continue to listen to consumers regarding ESG, clean labeling, and traceability. Continue to develop innovative and better for you product portfolios. Remain financially disciplined. And last but not least, reach out to HSBC to discuss potential financial support for ongoing and growth capital requirements, trade finance, and global cash management services.
All right, very well said. Thank you so much. John Church, Managing Director and Head of Food and Beverage for HSBC Bank. John, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Before we go, we're going to take a look at what's coming up in the food industry in the coming days. On April 24th, Coca-Cola releases their earnings for Q1 fiscal year 2023. On April 25th, the U.S. Conference Board releases the latest numbers on consumer confidence. And also on April 25th, we see more earnings releases with McDonald's and PepsiCo. On April 27th, the Bureau of Economic Analysis releases latest GDP numbers. And you also see fresh earnings for Hershey's and Domino's on that same day. Finally, on April 28th, final numbers on consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan. And that's our show. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Susan Choi. Don't forget to tune in same time, same place next week when our guest will be 𝗟𝗏𝘁 VP of Marketing at Nestle Professional. Nestle being a titan of CPG brands, she will be sure to give us her best expertise on industry news. Until next time, have a great weekend and take care.